Hey everyone, Joe Waxman here. And in this video, I want to look at the conjunction of Chiron and South Node. This will wrap up the Chiron series, and we'll be on to another one pretty soon. But guys, before I begin, don't forget to hit the like button, please. Helps me out a lot. And subscribe if you haven't already. Just had a class last night, went pretty well. Next class will be in 2 weeks. The Sunday, not this coming Sunday, the Sunday after. I'm not sure of the date yet, but any case. What is Chiron? Chiron you probably know by now, but if you're just tuning in for the first time, I gotta tell you what Chiron is. Chiron is a minor planet in between the orbit of Saturn and Uranus. It has a weird elliptical orbit where when it's in Libra, it's close to the orbit of Saturn, and when it's in Aries, it's closer to the orbit of Uranus. So it has an odd orbit, unlike the other planets. Chiron is a minor planet, but it also has characteristics of an asteroid, meaning that it's oddly shaped. It does also have rings, and it also has the tail of a comet, which they call a coma. So you can see that it's a complete maverick. It's totally unique and outside the box, independent, defying all stereotypes in a league of its own, right? It's just completely doing its own thing, it's shutting off all conditioning, social conditioning, and just out there being, it's probably the the freak of the skies, you could say, something like that. But it also has other qualities. Mythologically, Chiron was a centaur, but he was different from the other centaurs in that he was born with a full human body and a horse's torso growing at the back, where the other centaurs were a full horse body and then the human torso growing up out of the neck area. And then the other difference is that most of the centaurs were very aggressive, sexual. They like to drink and fight and have sex and all that. And they were crude and rude and violent and wild. And Chiron was initially rejected by his mother for being different, but also he was very spiritual, very evolved. He became a teacher. He was very wise. So kind of like this Jupiterian wisdom and teacher quality with this Uranian uniqueness, right? Totally independent. He was very good with medicine. He was a healer, a shaman, a mystic, an astrologer, a teacher, a wise man, all around, very knowledgeable teacher, healer type thing. And then his final episode was that Hercules asked him to create a poison for a poison arrow to defeat an enemy, which he did. And then by accident, Hercules shot him in the foot. One of the arrows hit him in the foot, and it killed him. And he was immortal otherwise. He would have been immortal, but he was killed by his own poison arrow, which is interesting. So that is Chiron. And it brings to mind all sorts of fictional sort of characters, because Chiron is so strange that it really lends itself to sort of disbelief and imagination, creativity, all kinds of outside the box, and then healing, obviously. And then if badly aspected, you get more like the rejection, the wounds. But Chiron's weird, whether it's well aspected or not well aspected, it definitely has an element of weirdness. Sometimes that's good because it can be sort of like the thing that separates somebody apart. If you have like 10 talented, good-looking people and one's just a bit more unique than the others, or a lot more unique, they might get it because they're just, it's the X factor, right? That's what Chiron often does, is it brings the X factor. Great for any sort of creativity, acting, movies, cinema, books, art, any creative works, or any wise kind of like teacher, healer, modality, spiritual, mystic, and sometimes outright just weird or deranged, right? And what is Ketu, South Node? South Node or Ketu is the south node of the moon. These are eclipse points from the moon, and South Node tends to be active when we're young. It is basically the point in our chart where we have learned lessons. We already know these lessons, but we're reviewing them. And we have a review session in our early life, going over all the lessons that we've learned previously, just to remind us of where we came from, where we're at. And it's sort of like a recap, right? And that's South Node. And past 42, South Node kind of goes dormant. And all the planets and aspects that are involved with South Node become there's an element of detachment, separation, inactivity, and also spirituality. Whereas when we're younger, all those planets that are conjunct South Node are active, and then they become dormant and more spiritual and detached. It's sort of like been there, done that, right? Like the feeling of graduating high school or college or anything else where you've already gone through it and completed it. You don't want to go back. It's redundant. So there's an element of detachment. The way you feel about high school, you're like, oh yeah, I remember that. Maybe some good memories, maybe some bad memories, but it's all in the past now, and there's no reason to go back. It's an ex relationship, right? Just like you wouldn't go back to an ex-lover. Sometimes people do, but generally speaking, you don't. You don't go back to high school once you graduated. You don't go back to the past once you finish something, and that's South Node. Right. And so South Node Chiron indicates somebody who grew up very Chironic, in a very Chironic way. Chiron was somehow representing their childhood and their early adult life, meaning that they were very unique, very individual, complete, maverick type person. If they were creative, they were probably exceptionally creative, outside the box. If they were maybe they have some elements of wisdom. Maybe they're a teacher, a mystic, a shaman, a healer, something like that. Or maybe they were just outright weird and strange and just completely in a league of their own category, undefinable. Maybe they're having multiple sides where they were representing some good things, some bad things, some, just outright weird things. It could be all of these, depending on the person. These planets tend to express themselves in multiple ways. Right? All the planets do. But let's begin. And as always, we're going to start with Aries. No, this is not Aries. I need to pull up Aries. Sorry. That was the last one I did. We got to end with Pisces, not begin with Pisces. And we're going with Shakira. Shakira, whose hips do not lie. Hold on. Shakira. I kind of like Shakira. I mean, I don't listen to her. I mean, that kind of music's annoying, but she's fun. Especially when I was in Mexico, I was all about Shakira. I don't know. Why not? So anyway, Shakira, Orlando Bloom, Floyd Mayweather Jr., Betty White, Telly Savalas, who was Kojak. Older people know who that is. And Giorgia Meloni, the PM of Italy, or president, or whatever it is. In any case, Shakira. South Node exactly conjunct Chiron in the first house. You know what? It's not making her weird. It's not. It makes her unique. She got a Grand Cardinal Cross. That's pretty interesting, pretty intense. But extremely successful. Jupiter in the second house in Taurus. I mean, that's, for a voice, that's basically what we'd want. And South Node Chiron in Aries, it's all like, hey, look at me. I'm completely different. I'm completely unique. You're not going to find a replica. You're not going to find anyone like me ever. anywhere in the universe. That's kind of South Node Chiron right from the get-go. It's in her first house. It's undeniable. Aquarius sun, also very unique. Aquarius suns tend to have a God complex, though, but they are crazy, and but you know, in the best way. I love them. Aquarius sun are very fun, very fellow air signs, you know, intellectuals. But they do tend to be quite crazy, and that actually this is opposition, mutual reception between Saturn by the degree, so that's pretty strong actually. 5th house and 11th house. Career success and entertainment. Moon and Cancer in the 4th, right, directly opposite an exalted Mars in Capricorn, so bonifying her 10th house. That's, you know, quite strong. Uranus is in a T-square between this mutual reception between Saturn and Sun. So in the 8th, very rebellious and very bringing in like some heightened sexuality with Uranus there, awakened sexuality in the 8th house Scorpio, definitely. And then of course North Node and Pluto. She's pretty, man, Pluto in the 7th really is a doozy, especially, you know, a sign like Libra. She's going to be very controlling in relationships. Like, she will definitely need to be the boss, you know, of whoever she's, I mean, she does have Venus in Aries, and she is Aries ascendant, Mars in Capricorn. Yeah. Sun, Saturn, mutual reception. She's definitely a bossy woman. But hey, you got to pay the price if you want to be with somebody like Shakira. Let me just check here. I know I'm going beyond the South Node Chiron interpretation, but I just need to look at everything, see what's yeah, so Moon, Jupiter, mutual reception by exaltation. That's excellent. And then, of course, Sun, Saturn. Yeah, early, you know, early success, voice, singing for 4th and 2nd, Moon and Jupiter. Brilliant. Yep, that's Shakira. All right. Let's go to Taurus. And in Taurus, we have Franz Mesmer, who is the, I guess he was like a psychologist or I don't know. He was a scientist, something like that. Mesmerism. They got mesmerism. He called it animal magnetism. I think he's like a biologist, perhaps. And then there's Michael Ballack, who's a soccer player, Busy Bone, who's a rapper, Edward Hopper, who's an amazing painter, a realist painter, and Inayat Khan, who's a Sufi singer, poet, mystic, teacher, and philosopher. And he brought Sufism to America, to the West. Or maybe not America, the West. I think it was England. But I want to look at his chart because he's very Chironic. But, you know, the point of this is obviously to explore the multiple sides of Chiron, to show you the full breadth and width of how Chiron can manifest, right? Especially conjunct the South Node. So we got South Node Chiron in Taurus, right? Right at the end of Taurus. What's interesting about this is if you take his life path, he was a Sufi. He was first of all a music teacher, musician, Sufi, singer, and he was obviously an adept at also poet at Sufism. But he spread it to the West, and the way you can recognize that is by seeing the South Node with all these planets here, and then North Node all alone, showing that ninth house in Scorpio, so mystical and philosophical, religious, going out all alone, leaving all of the friends and family behind. You see that? South node surrounded by Jupiter, Pluto, Chiron, Saturn, Neptune, Mercury, and Sun are also over here, right? So he's leaving, and then fourth house in it's pretty close to the fourth house. So he's leaving his neighborhood and his home to go to foreign lands. Ninth house is travels, right? Career, Jupiter, Sag in the MC, but ninth house as well. So there's something very adventurous and foreign about his destination. There's no personal planet, so he's going into the unknown. He's going into the wilderness of the foreign lands, and he spread Sufism there. But the South Node Chiron represents, especially in Taurus, a mystical, a chironic figure, a shaman, teacher, mystic, healer, but in a Taurian way. So he's involving music, very creative. Moon on the ascendant, Moon in Pisces on the ascendant, so very expressive, creatively expressive. Also, Uranus opposite Moon. That's pretty, shocking, but very awake and enlightened. Uranus also represents rhythm, so you'll see this with musicians. Uranus, prominent Uranus as well. Yeah, let's just check here. Mercury is very slow and retrograde. Everything else is direct. So slow planet. It's going to be very, refined, deliberate. Retrograde. It's going to be slightly defiant. But he's basically all his planets are direct, with the exception of Mercury, and the nodes are generally always direct. Yeah. Jupiter and Gemini square. Jupiter's bonifying this moon because Jupiter rules it, and it's in Gemini. Yeah, interesting. So that's Inayat Khan. He's representing definitely it's in the third house, so the more mystical, high-minded, healer aspect of Chiron. He's representing that well. Let's go to Gemini. And in Gemini, we have Warren Beatty, Sylvia Brown is a psychic, Michael Landon, the actor, Bill Wyman. He was the Rolling Stones bass player. Mary Travers, she was in Peter, Paul, and Mary of that group, so singer. Colin Powell, the general, and Merle Haggard, the musician. Let's look at Sylvia Brown. She's a psychic. Psychic medium. So Aquarius ascendant. Aquarius plays a prominent role generally in a lot of the mysticism things. You can look at Scorpio, Aquarius, Pisces, generally speaking, Cancer, all the water signs, but also Aquarius as well. So Saturn in Pisces, that's the ascendant lord. Strong 8th house, with Mars and Neptune, right? Neptune in the 8th in Virgo, but still bona fide by the Saturn. And Neptune, it's not really bona fide by the Saturn, but it's connected to Pisces by it. Neptune is, co-ruler of Pisces, so it's bonifying this Saturn. It's good for both planets. It's good for the Saturn if Neptune or Jupiter is, contacting it, in Pisces, but it's also good for the Neptune as well. Moon in Sag, Jupiter in Sag, 11th house. So Venus in Scorpio with Mars in the 8th. So MC in the 8th, conjunct Neptune, right? So career, first of all, Venus in Scorpio. Which house? Venus. 4th house, with Uranus dispositing, and 9th house. So early childhood and home and religion, philosophy, going into Scorpio. Scorpio is often very mystical, but then Mars in the 8th, conjunct Neptune. So that's very prominent. And then even though it's square the moon, it's still making contact with the moon. So the moon, for psychic, you always want to look at moon's conjunct Jupiter in the 11th. So, and then I didn't even talk about this, but South Node Chiron in Gemini in the 5th. So Chiron is, like I said, Chiron is a mystic. Chiron's a teacher, a healer. And, I don't recall anything about being psychic with Chiron. However, I wouldn't put it past a Chironic figure. It's generally, it's not psychic on its own, I would say, potentially, but it does bring a high level of potentially wisdom, teaching ability, shamanism, understanding of the mystical arts, right? So, yeah, there's that. It's trying the sun. Interesting, there's a semi-square to Uranus. Definitely making it even more unique, strange, odd. She might have had some negative Chironic associations when young, like feeling very much like an outcast, especially in school, 5th house, with friends, Gemini. North Node Jupiter. Jupiter is also ruling the 2nd, so interesting. Yeah. This axis is primarily, and then the T-square to the moon, and then also Venus. I mean, Venus in Scorpio, I guess, is helping. It's not really psychic on its own, but it's Mars and Neptune in the 8th. Mars also ruling the 3rd house of intellect. So yeah, in any case, that's Sylvia Browne. Famous psychic in Gemini. All right, let's go to Cancer, and we have Travis Scott. And the only reason I know Travis Scott is because he had that concert where a bunch of people died and it was all satanic and stuff, and that was awful. Magnus Carlsen, who's a world-class chess champion. William James, who is a psychologist, and Rita Ora, who's a singer. You probably never heard of, but I just threw that in there for good measure. We're going to look at Magnus Carlsen. Okay, South Node Chiron, conjunct the MC. So, I mean, this is really interesting. And, I like this for multiple reasons. One, Chiron's would never be associated with a chess champion, but here it is, so prominently conjunct the South Node in the MC. So I don't think it hurts. And how much does it help? Well, it probably helps because Chiron has this very high level association, right, with Uranus, with Saturn. More so with Uranus here bringing out these sort of genius level intellect, you could say, or just very high-minded. He has a Pluto that is unaspected in the 2nd house in Scorpio. So that's very prominent. You have to understand that because well, Pluto's in domicile in Scorpio. So number one, he's very, very deep thinking. Second house, even though it's sometimes you, not sometimes, it is associated with the voice. It's associated with resources and assets, but it's still operating on the mental level. 12th, first, and second house are still, well, third house is also the intellect, right? But these are all still personal houses. The second house deals with a resource of knowledge. So somehow this is creating an incredible wealth of, or incredibly deep and powerful resource base of intellect. In other words, somehow like his ability to keep track of all the pieces, of all the chess pieces. His memory. It's dealing with his memory because second house is the piggy bank of the mind. You could say it's the physical piggy bank, but it's also the mental piggy bank, right? And Scorpio, Pluto and Scorpio. There's the deep desire to control. That's Pluto, wanting to master and strategize everything, especially Pluto and Scorpio, and sort of the wealth of knowledge that the second house represents. All right. Venus and Sag. Let's check here. I'm just curious. I want to see what, oh, so Mars is Jupiter station. That's huge. That's huge. And then Sun Jupiter. Okay. So yeah, I didn't even look at that, but that's everything. That's not everything, but that's huge. Jupiter station in the 11th house. And so 11th house brings very high-minded quality, brilliant, really, can extend to a lot of things. And then Sun, Venus, basically conjunct the third house cusp, Jupiter. So Jupiter, 11th and 3rd, interchange, mutual reception with Jupiter stationary. So any planet that's stationary is extremely powerful. And this is also playing into his ascendant. So this is not, his chess genius is coming from two places. I mean, well, primarily Jupiter in mutual reception with the sun. The sun's conjunct Venus that represents him, so it's very tied into him. But it's not coming so much from Mercury, although Mercury's tied in there because Jupiter is so strong. But it's also coming from Pluto in the second. Right? And then South Node Chiron. And then, of course, Mars and Gemini, I'm sure, definitely helps in the 8th house. And, Moon in Taurus, sure, Moon trine Uranus. It all helps. Saturn in Capricorn helps tremendously. Conjunct the North Node, even in the 4th house, it's Saturn in Capricorn creates tremendous amount of discipline and hard work. So this is the type of person who can just, practice and be diligent and never mess up his mind with drugs and alcohol, or very rarely, right? So that's what a Saturn in Capricorn will do. Neptune is perfectly square the ascendant, but it's in Capricorn, so very active imagination. And then, because Saturn's in Capricorn, that's grounding this Neptune. It's not making it delusional. I mean, potential for delusion, but generally connected to, the Saturn, the Uranus and Neptune conjunction would be very expansive as far as imagination and, mental creativity. But then the Saturn in Capricorn here is bringing it all down to reality. That's pretty interesting. But he's very unique, one of a kind, a maverick, certainly. And with this Chiron South Node up here. and early success as well with South Node in the 10th house. Right. So let's go to Leo. And we have Armand Fallières, who's the president of France, and Frederic Bazille, who is a painter. And neither of these are very interesting, so I just thought I'd mention it. We're not going to go over it because, you know, like the other combinations, some of these conjunctions are rare, and we're not going to see them again, so there's not really any point. Virgo, there's nobody of note. In Libra, there's only one person, E.E. Cummings. We'll look at his chart because he is pretty significant. And it's pretty impressive that there's only E.E. Cummings as far as noteworthy people. And with Chiron conjunct South Node, Ketu. So here we have a tight conjunction in Libra of Chiron and South Node, and then Venus in Libra for the arts, and then Saturn in Libra. Even though his sun's in Libra, I mean, the Venus and Saturn are bonifying it. In the 5th house, so for entertainment, he's got Pluto, Gemini ascendant, Pluto, and Neptune. With Neptune in conjunct Mercury and Uranus in Scorpio in the 6th. So 6th house is about competition and the daily grind, daily work, daily routine. This is highly imaginative. First of all, Mercury rules Neptune, but so it's bonifying, but it's in conjunct, so it's making a very active imagination. Really good for creative work. Probably not so great for reality. Yeah, I don't know enough about him to really comment. He does have Jupiter in the 2nd. That's excellent for wealth, for voice, for you know, the written voice as well. Right? So, and it's unaspected, so it's pretty strong, it seems. He does have a Moon Mars conjunction in Aries, which is not so good for the moon. And so I wonder if he was a little bit abusive towards women or vulnerable people. Perhaps, but Saturn is in good dignity. The Sun is not in good dignity. So there's some issue here between parents, father and mother. And I don't know enough to comment, but it's certainly interesting. And then Mercury and Uranus is quite brilliant together. And then in Scorpio, it's going to be very deep diving. And again, highly imaginative here. But also Chiron is semi-square Mercury. So there could have been issues when he was young about his friend. There could have been, you know, a lot of possible fights with enemies, or, you know, somehow he felt too different with Chiron semi-square Mercury and Uranus, accidental. I think he went to war. He went to fight in the military. In any case, I'm not exactly sure the details, but there's some conflict here. So that would bring out some negative aspects of Chiron and Mercury relating to his intellect, his communication, the way he speaks, his friends. Could be very painful in Scorpio. In any case, it's certainly adding to his originality, uniqueness, brilliance. South Node, Chiron the 5th in Libra, especially with conjunct Venus in Libra. And he was very unconventional with his poetry. That's one of the things that stood out for him. He was a poet, and he just did things in a completely unique, different kind of way. But very imaginative, possibly even delusional. So, in any case, that's E.E. Cummings. Let's go to Scorpio. And in Scorpio, we have Ted Danson, John Carpenter, who's a filmmaker, Ronnie Van Zant, who is the singer of Lynyrd Skynyrd, Pierre Bourdain, who's a criminal killer, and Kenny Loggins. And I know some people don't like this, but I think it's interesting because I'm going to look up Pierre Bourdain, just because I think it's, I don't know, I like understanding what makes somebody turn to violence and criminality and murder. Yeah. So you got the South Node Scorpio, South Node Chiron and Scorpio. That's the first thing. It's in the 11th house. So definitely involved in some gang-like activity here, community, group criminality. And then we have 8th house activity as well with Saturn, Pluto, and then Moon. So Moon's in danger here because Saturn and Pluto are malefics, first-class malefics. So taking advantage of vulnerable people sexually or financially. Remember, you know, 8th house deals with shared resources, and that can mean many things, you know, including theft, right? But Pluto's 8th house and Pluto, also death. You know, Pluto can be, you know, violent. So can Saturn, especially when they're retrograde and you have bad aspects to them. And so Saturn retrograde has a square to the nodes in the 8th house, disposited by the sun in the 1st, conjunct Mercury. So that's all about, you know, taking what he wants, sex, money, somebody's life, with this conjunct Pluto and the moon. So you can see that not a very safe kind of. Also Mars in conjunct Venus, so that him being a man, his relationship to women is not very good, because the in conjunct says that not only his sexuality is twisted, maybe he's gay or bisexual, but or just that he wants to overpower women. Mars is in Virgo, so Mars and Virgo is pretty fighty, because Virgo, even though it's often, you know, puritanical and intellectual and critical, it definitely has the fighting ability, especially with Mars. Mars in Virgo has that, and then it's going to has a difficult relationship with this Venus, which is women for him. So definitely not a savory character. Venus is ruling the MC, the Neptune here, so also deception, lies, deceit, the public, right? Good for artists, bad for politicians and criminals, mean that they just lie publicly. And going into the 2nd house, values, right? He values women, not in a healthy way, disposited by Saturn. Okay, you sort of get the idea. He's representing a very dark side of Chiron, especially in Scorpio, where he feels free to be completely taboo, right? Chiron can go any way. It can be outside of the box in a good way or a bad way, apparently, right? And we got the square to Saturn and Pluto as well to back it up. Saturn and Pluto are retrogrades. Whenever a planet is retrograde and it has a bad aspect to it, you can expect that there's going to be a lot of resistance, either in a good way or bad. It doesn't necessarily make the person bad, but it means that they're going to be fighting. They're going to be fighting something in a big way. They're going to be in serious resistance. because the retrograde is resisting, and then the square forces that resistance. It pushes that resistance. So, yep. Jupiter's in Sag, and that's his ascendant lord, which is really interesting. Doesn't make him a good person, obviously, right? It probably makes him successful, especially in hidden matters, secrets, deception, deceit, lies. But yeah, it's certainly not. And then the sun, Mercury is trine Mars, so he's obviously got some skills, some talent. Mars ruling the fourth from early age, and then dispositing the South Node in Chiron, ruling the 11th. So career success in the ninth, eighth, ninth. In any case, I don't want to take too much time on this. Sun is ruling the eighth in the first, so sex, money, death, all that. Seventh in the first, Mercury, bringing other people to him, shocking relationships with other people, Uranus and Gemini, shocking trickster, practical joker as well. Loves to fool people, play jokes on them, cruel jokes. All right, so that would be Pierre Bodin. Nobody in Sagittarius, and in Capricorn we have Francisco Torrega. He is a classical guitar master. Emperor Meiji of the Meiji era, Japan. And Robert the Bruce. So notice, and these are the only three people, but Capricorn, we've got bosses, we got leaders, we got an emperor, and we got the king of the Scots, Robert the Bruce, and we got a guitar master. But we're gonna look at Robert the Bruce. He was the king of the Scots. He fought for the independence of Scotland, and I'm not sure of the whole story, but he did win a lot of stuff. Like he won battles and won land and won all kinds of things. And he worked with William Wallace, you know, the Braveheart, Mel Gibson, Braveheart, William Wallace. So I think he worked with William Wallace to achieve independence for Scotland, at least for a while, and not really sure on the details. But South Node, Chiron, Capricorn, MC in Capricorn, the boss, the sign of the boss. Capricorn is the sign of the boss. Capricorn is the sign of captain. And South Node Chiron shows that he's very much a unique, one of a kind, irreplaceable captain, especially in the 10th house from a young age, right? And in the 9th whole sign house, that's indicating something about religion, philosophy, travel, adventure. Even you could say, you could bring in a fighting, because Sagittarius still has this kind of warrior quality, a very high, noble warrior, right? Unlike 8th house, which can be, you know, internal, external war. 9th house war is going to be a much bigger war. You could think of a religious or philosophical war, right? That would be the war of the 9th house of Jupiter, of Sag. Let's see here. Chiron's retrograde. Retrograde planets, when they're, remember I said, retrograde, it's exactly opposite sun. So, and North Node, so North Node Sun. So North Node Sun is interesting because Sun represents, Sun rules Leo, Sun is the king, right? So North Node conjunct the Sun, perfect for a king. He was a king of the Scots, right? And then there's a difficult aspect with Uranus in the 2nd in Gemini, both with the nodes and Sun and Chiron. So he's a very one-of-a-kind king, obviously, with Chiron opposite the sun. And then the aspect to Uranus is bringing out something very shocking and accidental and sudden. I don't know exactly. It could be accidental sudden rise, accidental sudden fall. Perhaps. I'd have to do a bit more research to verify that. Moon square Venus is, but Venus is that's a mutual reception, so that's actually quite good. Dissatisfaction, but it kind of resolves itself through effort. Sixth house and fourth house. Daily grind, working hard, homeland. Fourth is homeland, right? King of the homeland. And sixth house and everyday kind of competition, fighting, definitely fighting. Pluto retrograde, semi-square, sesqui-square Mercury in Leo, fifth house, conjunct Neptune. So he's definitely, Pluto retrograde in bad aspect is going to be, really digging your heels in deeply. There's no more willful planet than Pluto, and when Pluto's retrograde, it's in deep resistance. And when it's badly aspected or negative, when it's difficult aspect, you can see where the struggle is. This is with Mercury and Leo. So obviously with, let's see what house Mercury second, second and fifth whole sign. With values, Leo generally, I mean, obviously he's fighting the British royalty, so that makes me think about that. Leo, communication, managerial. He wants to be captain and he wants to rule his own land. So there's a difficult communication with royalty, obviously. And yeah. Jupiter's also retrograde at 0 degrees Pisces. So it's a very good dignity opposite Neptune. Difficult perspective regarding religion, philosophy, disagreement with the royalty, British royalty, as far as the philosophy goes. Maybe there was a religious disagreement. He wanted to do things, I don't know enough about him, but in any case. Certainly a maverick, certainly a captain, right? And then Saturn, trine is bonifying this, really helping it out a lot. Saturn, rule, authority, Saturn, trine, sun, or sextile sun, sorry. Really giving him a very authoritative quality, leadership in the fifth house, entertainment. Fifth house is just generally a good house. It's an all-around house. Can mean a lot of things. You need your king to be a good leader, speaker, hold the stage, hold the people's attention. Needs to be a good showman. It's actually really important because if people don't have faith in the leader, then they don't have faith in the country or anything it produces. We're seeing that with America. So having the very prominent presence, which would be, you'd see in the fifth house, is important. So anyway, that's Robert the Bruce. Fascinating. Let's move on to Aquarius. Josephine Baker, who is the dancer and singer and actress of old. Ed Gein, who's a murderer. Luchino Visconti is a filmmaker. Hannah Arendt is a political philosopher. And Estee Lauder started with her husband, Estee Lauder, the makeup company. And forgive me for those of you squeamish. Once again, I want to look at the criminal element here. Perhaps it's my scorpionic side that wants to look at fellow, although he's not Scorpio strong, but we'll look at that, what's going on there. He's Pluto strong. Yeah. Not that I'm a criminal, but I am scorpionic, and there's multiple ways Scorpio, 8th house, Pluto can express itself, right? So on the lower end, it definitely deals with drugs, sex, murder, crime, theft, all that. Power over others, right? So this guy was a not only murderer, he was a body snatcher, and he exhumed dead bodies and held them as trophies. So pretty disgusting. I mean, okay, so South Node Chiron in Aquarius in the ninth house. Okay. Man. Yeah. So Chiron's retrograde, it's in Aquarius. So Aquarius is very unique out of the box. Aquarius, just in general, South Node in Aquarius, loves to be completely independent, unique, crazy, brilliant. They love to flaunt how different they are. It's potentially, not always, but Chiron on its own is like that, even more so, right? Uranus ruling Aquarius, Chiron being even more unique than Uranus, right? And then in retrograde, it's not only that, but it's defiant as well. It's resistance. It's going against the grain. Chiron retrograde in Aquarius, South Node, is like beyond. It's just like it scoffs at normality. It's like, it wants to exhibit the most unusual kind of taboo or just completely outside the box, just completely deranged. I mean, this guy was considered insane. I'll just give you the short story. He was insane. And then we see that with the South Node Chiron retrograde in Aquarius. Ninth house, not only that, Chiron is strongly sesquisquare Pluto. Pluto is conjunct the ascendant in Gemini. That's really deranged, right? Now we're just getting like freedom to be completely Plutonic and Chironic in the lowest of ways. So like just no limitations as far as like how deranged and Plutonic this guy can be, because Pluto is exactly conjunct by 2 degrees the ascendant in Gemini. Gemini is the hands, right? So like taking things. So there's multiple things going on here. Pluto is also opposite Moon. Pluto-Moon opposition is very difficult because these people want to take advantage of weaker, more vulnerable people. Moon in the 7th. Who else had Moon in the 7th? Jeffrey Dahmer. Of course, he had Mars there too, but Moon in the 7th is dealing with vulnerable people, women or vulnerable men, anyone vulnerable. Moon is in the 2nd house. Cancer is in the 2nd house. So Moon's ruling the 2nd house. So that's 2nd house Lord is in the 7th. So that's values, that's possessions. And then there's a mutual reception. Sag is in the 2nd. So you can see that he wants to value vulnerable people in a very destructive way with Pluto. Pluto bringing in this weirdness of Chiron, the insanity of Chiron in Aquarius South Node retrograde, 9th house, adventurous, right? And his philosophy, his belief system, his philosophy is completely insane, right? Because of the negative aspect to Chiron and Pluto. And he's taking advantage of people and he's bringing them home to his possessions, valuing them. These are his trophies. It's pretty sick. You gotta laugh at it because it's like so disgusting. Sun, sesqui square Venus. So his son has a bad relationship with women. Sorry, not semi-square. I always say the wrong thing sometimes. A lot of times, I guess. Jupiter's in conjunct the south node, but it's connecting to Chiron as well. So there's multiple bad aspects there. A little bit wide, but still opposite Mercury and Mars, especially by conjunction to the node from Chiron. And then Saturn also, Saturn's ruling the eighth. So again, eighth lord and 10th connection. Saturn's ruling the 10th and the 10th, but yeah, but eighth and the 10th, eighth lord and the 10th. And then Uranus in Scorpio, or Uranus in Capricorn in the 7th, but eighth whole sign house. So shocking, something very shocking, accidental, extreme, especially it's opposite Jupiter and Neptune. So Jupiter and Neptune is really expanding the imagination, very heightened imagination, quite shocking. Uranus is retrograde, so Uranus is in deep resistance. So like, or the kind of this ability to be rebellious is heightened by this opposition, this desire, this need to be also in the 7th house, shocking, relating to other people, also 8th house pulling in there. So main thing is this guy's insane, and he's got Pluto desires, and in the 3rd house, so it's crazy. 3rd house intellect, 9th house Aquarius. Yeah, Mars semi-square Jupiter. Even though Jupiter is in good dignity, this Neptune is making him overly imaginative. Mars in poor aspect to Jupiter, or Jupiter Neptune in this case, is kind of like chasing imaginary things. So in any case, this is what insanity looks like. One example, but we don't need to spend too long on it. Obviously, Chiron is not always going to create this wonderful being, whether it's in any, it can mean somebody who's just too far out of the box and in not a good way. You have to look at everything. So let's go to Pisces. And we got George Clooney, Eddie Murphy, Susan Boyle, George Lopez, and Isaiah Thomas. He's a basketball player, but I want to look at Eddie Murphy. So Pisces, creative genius, right? From the start, from early on, in the 7th, 8th house. So with others, in relation to others, but like, going deep. And his comedy is pretty aggressive. Like if you've ever seen him do stand up, it definitely goes into like, he's one of these comics that can definitely go dirty. That's quite common within comedy, right? It's sort of accepted. I don't like it as much, but it's acceptable, especially. But you'll see with a lot of these comics who really like to be dirty, is that they have planets in poor dignity. It's got Mars in Cancer, sex and violence, Moon in Scorpio, right? A deep, intense mind that goes into crises, and the 4th house. Moon conjunct Neptune in Scorpio. So he's a lot more, I would say that Eddie Murphy is a lot more dark than he presents himself to be. I'm telling you, he's hiding a lot. of who he really is. A lot of his comedy comes from Uranus on the ascendant. Uranus definitely relates to comedy, but he also has the requisite Jupiter in Aquarius, which a lot of comedians have, Jupiter in Aquarius, right? So he could be a regular on a comedy show, you know, SNL. Obviously, he turned more towards movies, and then that would be more of the moon, you know, moon trine Mars in Cancer, and that's mutual reception, and that's actually really strong, right? Even though they're both in poor dignity, it's mutual reception, so they gain from that. Really interesting thing is that he's got his sun exalted in Aries in the ninth. Sun is his ascendant lord, but Venus is also here in Aries, and Venus is in detriment in Aries. His father was stabbed by a woman. Now, isn't that the most interesting thing? Sun's in good dignity, but it has a bunch of bad aspects. First of all, I like to say that Venus would be bona fide by this sun, but look how many bad aspects the sun has. Mars in Cancer in poor dignity, working together with, in perfect harmony, almost like a collusion. Mars in Cancer, feminine Mars, violent Mars, with Moon, also feminine, Scorpio, mutual reception here, with Neptune in Scorpio. That's Neptune's delusion, fantasy, right? Both in bad aspect to the sun, quite by 1 degree, right? So tightly. So 3 factors: violence, moon, and women, all hitting this strong sun negatively. So apparently you know, the sun couldn't take it, but I don't think it's all bad, right? Because Mars does rule Aries. So even though there's a square here, I mean, so obviously they're with a aspect like this, multiple aspect like this, there's good and bad. His father represented death. Also, Uranus in Leo, and that is Uranus is retrograde. So Uranus represents accidents, Leo represents father. So that's interesting, and it can also represent trauma, right? So he has some trauma around the father, especially because it's retrograde. Yeah, there's no real bad aspects to this Uranus, so that's, I mean, but it is retrograde, and it is on the ascendant, and it is in Leo, and it's disposited by this exalted sun. In any case, you can see that he himself had a very successful career and still does, but there are certain challenges that he faces. He was a maverick, creative maverick right from early age. The South Node Chiron Pisces, Jupiter in Aquarius, a comic, comic genius. Then as he gets older, he's definitely becoming much more serious. North Node conjunct Pluto. And there's only this really intense aspect between Pluto, Chiron, the nodes, in as far as this Pluto and Chiron. So Pluto has no other aspects other than to Chiron in the opposition. And I don't know enough details about his life, but there must be something there that's going to be significant. North Node Pluto is going to be very, very deep, psychological, transformative, painful. And I think, he's had these long periods of silence where he's not been active. He hasn't been making movies. And he always does these like movies that don't feel very genuine to me, because I think he's hiding his there's something that he's about his life that he doesn't want to be public. Pluto can be very private, protective, so can Virgo. Any case, it is moving into the second house, and he does sing. He's a singer. So that's something. Mercury's in Pisces. Not a very intellectual Mercury, but a creative Mercury. He's very imaginative, but dark. He's a bit dark. And you see that coming through in his comedy, but not so much in these ridiculous kind of movies that he does. Some of them are ridiculous. I heard he did a newer movie that was quite successful that the critics loved and everything. He does have Saturn and Capricorn in the 6th, so he's a very hard worker and a fighter. So, his treatment of women might not be great because of the strong sun and then Venus, but then he might be also, you know, it's mutual. I mean, the women are certainly hitting the sun pretty hard, right? We could say that. So it's abusive relationship with women, I'm guessing. Because yeah. And why was his father stabbed by a woman? What did he do to her? I don't know. I don't know the story. Maybe, you know, could be anything. But in any case, it's all speculation. But yeah, definite comedic, creative genius. Leo is very colorful, loves show business, very bright. And then, you know, Uranus, which I already talked about. Uranus and Leo is going to be very, very colorful, extremely colorful. Leo's colorful. That's one of the things. Leo and Pisces both extremely colorful, bright colors, bright, vivid, fully saturated colors when you're talking about Leo or Pisces. It's not one of the darker signs, either one. Well, Pisces can be dark, but it's dark and colorful. Leo's bright and colorful. But fire signs for comedy, also for the expression. Water for the actual comedy, fire for the delivery. So you see that Aries, Leo, and then Aquarius, and then Uranus. So anyway, that's Eddie Murphy, and that is South Node Chiron. Early Maverick, early X Factor, early, you know, could be creative genius or something spiritual, mystical healing, or sometimes just outright insanity, as is the case in a few examples, a couple examples. Or could be a combination. I actually knew somebody who was had South Node Chiron. This person died, but total maverick, totally unique, one of a kind, irreplaceable, just like, you know, stands out. Yeah, they're 1 in a million, South Node Chiron. They just stand out from everyone, good or bad. And sometimes it is a mix. You know, you'll get a lot of, you know, creative genius as well as like just really kind of like bold insanity. But that's what they say. There's a fine line between genius and insanity. And I think Chiron crosses that line. That's essentially Chiron vacillates between insanity and genius. So there you have it. And that's wrapping up the Chiron series. All right, guys, please hit the like button if you can, and leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Come to my next class. I'll tell you more about that. I think the topic will be on nodes. That was suggested. So we'll do a class on the nodes. Yesterday was on retrogrades. Really fascinating. And book a reading with me, macroastrology.com. That's my website. macrogoldmachine@yahoo.com is my email address. And I will see you again soon. Thanks. Bye.